human engineer, crafted a limb for an alien child that same day their queen came to him. James Foster pressed his thumb against the neural interface port, watching the microscopic sensors flare to life beneath translucent polymer. The prosthetic limb hummed on his workbench, servos cycling through their range of motion with whisper-quiet precision. Across the cluttered workshop, Nea sat on a stool that was 2 sizes too large for her. Pink-skinned legs swinging in anticipation, her tail coiled tight around the metal seat. "Is it ready?" she asked, her voice pitched high with barely restrained excitement. "Almost," James said, making a final adjustment to the pressure calibration. "Need to make sure the feedback sensors won't overwhelm your nervous system. Your species processes tactile information differently than mine." The child leaned forward, her large eyes fixed on the mechanical leg. It gleamed under the workshop's harsh lighting, a marriage of salvaged components and custom fabrication that had consumed 3 weeks of 18-hour days. The settlement's machine shop had donated materials. The medical bay had provided biological data. James had provided everything else. He lifted the prosthetic, feeling its weight, checking the balance one last time. The colony's refugee settlement wasn't exactly equipped for cutting-edge biomedical engineering, but he'd learned to work with what he had. Resourcefulness beat perfection when perfection wasn't an option. "All right," he said, moving toward her. "Let's see if 3 weeks of work pays off." Nea straightened, her small hands gripping the edges of the stool. The fabric wrap covering the stump of her right leg had been removed earlier, revealing the clean amputation site just below where her knee would have been. James had spent hours studying the scans, understanding how her circulatory system branched, how her nerves clustered differently than human anatomy. He knelt beside her, aligning the prosthetic socket with careful precision. The interface sleeve slid into place with a soft click. Nea's breath caught. "You'll feel a tingle," James said, activating the neural connection. "That's normal. The sensors are learning your signals." The child's eyes widened. Her tail unwound from the stool, tip twitching with each new sensation. James watched the diagnostic display on his tablet, tracking the handshake between biological and mechanical systems. Green indicators cascaded down the screen. "Try moving your toes," he said. Nea's face scrunched in concentration. The prosthetic's articulated foot flexed, toes curling and releasing. She gasped, a sound of pure wonder. "It works," she whispered. "It works," James confirmed, unable to suppress his grin. "Want to try standing?" She nodded, gripping his offered hands. He helped her down from the stool, supporting her weight as she found her balance. The prosthetic adjusted automatically, micro-corrections happening faster than conscious thought. Nea wobbled, her organic leg trembling with effort, but the artificial limb held steady beneath her. "Easy," James said. "Your brain needs time to integrate the new input." But Nea wasn't listening. She released his hands, standing on her own, arms spread wide for balance. Her tail swept back and forth, a counterweight against uncertainty. She took one step, then another, then a third. By the 4th step, tears were streaming down her pink cheeks. "I can walk," she said, her voice cracking. "I can actually walk." James felt something tighten in his chest. This was why he'd come to the frontier colonies, why he'd left a comfortable research position on Earth. Not for the prestige or the publications, but for moments like this. For the look on a child's face when the impossible became possible. Nea crossed the workshop, her gait growing steadier with each step. She reached the far wall, touched it with both hands, then turned and walked back. By the time she reached James, she was laughing through her tears. "Thank you," she said, throwing her arms around his waist. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." James hugged her back, feeling the warmth of her small body against his. Over her shoulder, he could see Sarah Brennan standing in the workshop doorway, the settlement administrator's eyes glistening. "You did good, Foster," Sarah said, her voice rough. Before James could respond, a shadow fell across the doorway. Sarah turned, then stepped back quickly, her expression shifting from emotion to alarm. 3 figures entered the workshop, moving with military precision. They wore armor James didn't recognize, segmented plates of dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their faces were concealed behind helmets with narrow vision slits. Naya pulled away from James, her joy evaporating into fear. She pressed herself against his side. "James Foster," the lead figure said, voice filtered through a speaker that made it sound both distant and immediate. "You are summoned." "Summoned by who?" James asked, placing a protective hand on Naya's shoulder. "By she who has claim to the child," the guard said. "By blood and by right, by Ressa, rightful queen of the Kethari." The words hit James like cold water. Queen. Naya had never mentioned her mother's identity, and James had never pressed. The settlement housed hundreds of refugees from dozens of conflicts. Everyone had a story they didn't want to tell. "The queen arrives within the hour," another guard said. "She will speak with you regarding your service to the royal bloodline." Royal bloodline. James looked down at Naya, seeing her differently now. Not just a refugee child, but someone who mattered in ways that transcended the settlement's makeshift boundaries. "She's coming here?" Sarah asked, her administrator's instinct kicking in. "We're not exactly prepared for—" "The queen requires no preparation," the third guard interrupted. "Only compliance." A klaxon suddenly shrieked through the settlement, its wail cutting through the tension. James knew that sound. Everyone in the settlement knew that sound. Incoming threat. Attack alert. The guards' postures shifted immediately, hands moving to weapons James hadn't noticed beneath their armor. Sarah was already running for the door, shouting into her communicator. "How many?" the lead guard barked. Sarah's face had gone pale. She looked at the guards, then at James, then at Nia. "6 ships," she said. "Military configuration. They're broadcasting a demand for the Queen's location." The lead guard's helmet turned toward Naya, then toward James. "They've found her," he said, his filtered voice carrying a note of grim resignation. "Kryn's hunters always find her." James felt Naya's fingers dig into his shirt, her small body trembling. Through the workshop's single window, he could see people running, parents gathering children, the organized chaos of a settlement that had practiced evacuation drills too many times. The sky above the distant landing pad flared bright, not the yellow-white of atmospheric entry, but the blue-green of military thrusters. Ships were descending fast, too fast for peaceful intentions. "We need to move," the lead guard said. "The Queen will meet us at the eastern perimeter. If we're fortunate, we'll reach her before." An explosion cut off his words. The workshop's walls shuddered. Dust rained from the ceiling. Through the window, James saw a plume of smoke rising from the direction of the main gate. "Before that," the guard finished. Naya looked up at James, her eyes wide with terror and trust in equal measure. The prosthetic leg he'd spent 3 weeks perfecting stood steady beneath her, ready for whatever came next. James made a decision that would change everything. "Then let's not wait," he said, reaching for the emergency supply pack he kept by his workbench. "Let's go meet your mother." The eastern perimeter was chaos. James kept one hand on Naya's shoulder, guiding her through fleeing refugees while the royal guards formed a protective wedge around them. The prosthetic leg adapted to the uneven ground without hesitation. An explosion rocked the settlement. James caught Naya before she fell, lifting her into his arms. "There," the lead guard said, pointing toward a transport vehicle. James saw the woman beside it first. Rissa commanded attention like gravity commanded orbit. Taller than him by half a head, skin the deep violet blue of twilight marked with silver patterns, hair bound in combat braids. She wore armor that looked both ceremonial and lethal. Her eyes found Naya first, scanning her daughter with compressed relief and fear. Then those eyes shifted to James, assessing him with warrior's precision. "You're the engineer," Rissa said. "James Foster," he replied, setting Naya down. The child ran to her mother. Rissa caught her, held her for exactly 3 seconds, then checked the prosthetic with efficient appraisal. "Functional?" "She walked across my workshop. She'll need to do more than walk." Rissa's gaze moved to the smoke rising from the settlement's center. "Torvin, status." The lead guard retracted his helmet, revealing scarred features. 6 Hunter-class vessels, my queen, extermination protocol." Rissa's jaw tightened, silver markings pulsing with reflected light. "Kryn commits fully. She fears what your work represents, engineer." James blinked. My work? I built a prosthetic. How does... Questions later. Survival now. Rissa moved toward the transport. Torvin, canyon route. The canyon's a kill zone if they track us. Everything's a kill zone. At least there I can use terrain. Guards loaded equipment with practice speed. James found himself being ushered forward, Naya still gripping his hand. Wait, my workshop? I have equipment, research data. Irrelevant, Rissa said. Not if you want me to maintain her prosthetic. Do your people have engineers who can work with human Cathari interfaces? Rissa turned, expression caught between annoyance and respect. 2 minutes, Torvan goes with you. James ran. They reached the workshop partially collapsed from a near miss. He grabbed his backup drive and portable fabrication kit, then snatched a half-finished prototype on impulse. Time, Torvin said. They sprinted back. The transport was moving when James grabbed the rail and hauled himself in. Through the rear window, he watched another section collapse under weapons fire. Sarah's voice crackled over his communicator. Foster, where are you? En route to the canyon, casualty count? Minimal. They're targeting infrastructure, not people. Looking for something specific. James glanced at Rissa studying her tactical display. She met his eyes and nodded once. Not something. Someone. Stay safe, Sarah. He ended transmission. The transport hit a rut hard enough to throw everyone against restraints. They've launched pursuit craft, Rissa said. 4 minutes until intercept. This vehicle won't outrun them, Torvan called from the driver's seat. I know, Rissa looked at James. Can you shoot? I'm an engineer, not a soldier. That wasn't my question. James thought about mandatory target practice sessions. Adequate, if not great. Yes. Rissa handed him a sidearm, heavier than expected. Safety here, trigger pull is heavy, center mass, 3-round bursts. James checked the weapon competently. Rissa nodded approval, returned to her display. 3 minutes. The canyon walls rose like ancient ribs around them. The transport plunged into shadow. Here they come, Torvin said. Sleek craft dropped into the canyon behind them, weapon ports glowing. Evasive. The transport swerved. The canyon wall erupted in superheated rock. Heat washed through the open compartment. Naya screamed. Rissa pushed her down, covering her daughter with her own body. Return fire. Guards opened up with mounted weapons. Energy bolts streaked back, forcing pursuit craft to break formation. One clipped the wall, spinning away in sparks. A craft broke through, accelerating directly toward them. James saw weapon ports charging, saw the killing angle. Left, he shouted. Torvin jerked the wheel. The transport tilted, scraping stone. The blast meant for their engine tore a furrow where they'd been. But a wheel caught in loose rock. The back end slammed into the wall. Metal screamed. Mounted weapons tore free. They stopped, smoke billowing. Out, Rissa commanded. Into the rocks. They scrambled free as another blast turned the transport into a fireball. James stumbled backward from the heat. Naya! Here, Rissa said, daughter held against her side. Move. They ran for rock formations. Pursuit craft circled above, engines whining. A bolt struck near James's feet. He dove behind a boulder, air driven from his lungs. Another craft descended, boarding ramp lowering. Armored figures emerged. They want prisoners, Torvin called. They want proof, Rissa corrected. Dead bodies can't testify. James looked at his sidearm, at Naya huddled behind her mother, at the advancing soldiers. An idea crystallized, reckless, probably stupid, but he'd spent his career solving impossible problems with inadequate resources. The transport, is the fabrication unit intact? Rissa stared at him. This is not the time. Is it intact? She glanced at the burning vehicle, calculating. Rear compartment wasn't breached, possibly. I need 3 minutes and someone to cover me. For what? To give us better odds than running and shooting. Rissa studied him. Above, craft circled. On the ground, soldiers advanced. Every second mattered. You saved my daughter. I'll trust you to save yourself. Torvin, covering fire. I'm going with him. She moved, using rocks as cover, advancing with lethal grace. James ran after her, already cataloging what he needed. They reached the transport. Heat was intense. Rissa tore the rear door open, revealing his equipment miraculously intact. What do you need? That case, and 30 seconds to wire it. She handed him the fabrication kit. Her shoulder pressed against his as they crouched, close enough to feel her breathing. Your sister really hates you, James said, working frantically. She has reason, though perhaps not the reasons she believes. James caught something in her expression suggesting depths he didn't have time to unpack. Done. He held up a sphere studded with sensor nodes. EMP grenade. Crude, probably unstable, but it should disable their systems if I get it close enough. Rissa looked at the device, then at James. Something shifted in her eyes, recognition that he was dangerous in entirely different ways. How close? Uncomfortably close. She smiled, sharp and predatory. I can work with uncomfortable. She grabbed the device and stood, all coiled muscle and precise violence. James watched her sprint toward the enemy, reading terrain and timing with pure instinct. She threw the grenade with perfect accuracy. The pulse wave hit like silent thunder, soldiers' armor locked up, weapons died, even circling craft staggered, sensors blinded. Rissa was on them instantly, moving through their formation like water through cracks, disarming, disabling, never killing but leaving no one capable of pursuit. Torvin and the guards joined her, turning confusion into complete rout. 45 seconds and it was over. James emerged as the last soldier fell. Rissa stood among them, breathing hard but controlled, looking more alive than anyone had right to after a firefight. She walked back, stopped close enough that he had to look up to meet her eyes. You fight in unconventional ways, engineer. I'm an unconventional person. I'm beginning to understand that. Her hand rested on his shoulder, heavy with more than physical weight. Then Nea was there, hugging them both, and Torvin reported pursuit craft regrouping, and they were moving again, deeper into the canyon. But James kept thinking about that moment of recognition in Rissa's eyes, about how she'd trusted his plan without fully understanding it, about how her touch had lingered. They reached an abandoned mining facility at sunset, empty chambers carved into rock, but it was shelter. Rissa directed guards to secure the perimeter while James checked Nea's prosthetic. The girl fell asleep against her mother's side, exhausted but unharmed. She trusts you, Rissa said quietly. The feeling's mutual. She's brave. She's had to be. The words carried weight James didn't understand. He finished his examination. The prosthetic had performed beyond projections. It held up well. You built it well. Their eyes met, held. The chamber suddenly felt smaller. Torvin's voice crackled over communication. My queen, long-range scans show a capital-class vessel entering orbit, Kryn's personal flagship. Rissa stood, hand moving to her weapon. She's committed everything. This ends one way or another. James looked at Nea, sleeping peacefully despite danger, her new leg extending in perfect alignment. He thought about 3 weeks making that possible, about her smile taking first steps, about how Rissa looked at her daughter like she was the only thing worth fighting for. Tell me, why does this matter so much? Why are they trying so hard to kill us? Rissa was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried new vulnerability. Because you proved something today, James Foster, something that threatens everything my sister built her power upon. She turned to face him fully, silver markings seeming to glow in the dim light. Tomorrow, if we survive, I'll tell you the truth about Nea, about why I was exiled, about what your work truly represents. She moved closer, close enough that he could feel heat radiating from her skin. Tonight, just know you've become more valuable than you understand and more endangered because of it. Her hand found his in the darkness, squeezed once with surprising gentleness, then released. Get some rest, engineer. Tomorrow will test us both. James watched her walk away to check on her guards. Sleep would be difficult, not just because of the danger, but because of how his hand still tingled where she'd touched it, because of the promise in her words. Because somewhere between the workshop and the firefight, something had begun that felt as inevitable as it was unexpected. The night deepened. Outside, enemy forces regrouped, and James lay awake, thinking about silver markings and impossible prosthetics and the weight of a queen's hand in his. Dawn came cold. James woke to find Rissa at the chamber entrance, silhouetted against growing light. He approached quietly, but she turned before he reached her. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Sleep is a luxury I stopped affording myself years ago." James stood beside her, looking out at the canyon bathed in purple-gray light. "You promised me truth this morning." Rissa's hand tightened on the rock wall. When she finally spoke, words came slowly. "Nea wasn't injured in battle, James. She wasn't caught in crossfire or wounded by enemies. She was born without the limb." Cold settled in James's stomach. Birth defects happen in every species. Why would... Not in the royal bloodline, not in 3,000 years of recorded Cathari history. Rissa's eyes fixed on something distant. "We are warriors, perfect warriors. Our bodies are temples of strength, bred and refined across millennia. Physical perfection isn't just valued, it's sacred, proof of divine favor." Horror crept up James's spine. They called her cursed. They called her abomination. The priests declared it divine judgment. My sister saw opportunity. The council demanded I either surrender my claim to the throne or surrender Nea to the Temple of Correction. What's the Temple of... They would have killed her, ritually, publicly, to cleanse the bloodline and restore divine favor. Rage ignited in James's chest. "So you ran." "I chose my daughter over my throne. Kryn assumed power, built her entire legitimacy on the idea that I was judged and found wanting by the gods themselves." Rissa moved closer. "Then you come along. You prove it's not divine curse, it's biology, fixable biology. You've made my daughter whole, and in doing so, you've become the single greatest threat to Kryn's power. That's why she sent her entire fleet. That's why she'll never stop. As long as you live, as long as Nea walks on that prosthetic, the lie is exposed." James absorbed the weight of what he'd done, innocently, just trying to help. "You could have told me. Would it have changed what you did?" He thought about Nea's face, taking her first steps. "No, I know." Rissa's hand rose, settled against his chest, palm warm through his shirt. "You did it because it was right, because you saw a child who needed help and you had the skills to provide it. You didn't calculate cost or consequence." Her fingers curled, gripping the fabric. "Do you understand how rare that is? In my world, everything is transaction, alliance, leverage. People don't help because it's right." James covered her hand with his own. "Maybe I'm just a terrible politician. Maybe you're just a good man." The space between them felt charged. Rissa's eyes searched his face. "James, if we survive this..." "My queen." Torvin's voice cut through the moment. "We have movement, multiple signatures converging on our position." Rissa stepped back, warrior reasserting itself, but her eyes lingered on James. "How long?" 30 minutes, maybe less." She turned to James. "We can't fight them. Not with the numbers they'll bring. There's nowhere left to run. Kryn has orbital superiority." James's mind raced. Then something clicked. "What if we don't run? What if we broadcast the truth? Show your people that Nea can walk." Kryn controls all major channels. But she has orbital superiority, ships up there with powerful transmitters that can reach the entire planet. Understanding dawned in Rissa's eyes. "You want to hijack her flagship's communications array? Turn her greatest strength into her greatest weakness. We get aboard, override her systems, show your people that Nea's not cursed. She's healed. We don't just expose Kryn's lie. We shatter it." Torvin looked at James like he'd lost his mind. "That's suicide. The flagship will be heavily defended. Kryn herself will be aboard." "Probably," James agreed. "Unless we have an advantage she doesn't expect." He turned to Rissa. "You know that ship, its layout, systems, weaknesses. I can work with any technology given time. Together we might last 5 minutes before being executed," Rissa finished. But something in her expression wasn't quite refusal. "It's reckless. The odds are catastrophically against us." So were the odds of creating a prosthetic for a species I'd never worked with. I'm getting comfortable with bad odds. Rissa studied him. Then slowly a smile spread across her face, warm, genuine. "You're either brilliant or insane." "I'm an engineer, usually both." She laughed, the sound surprising them both. Then her expression sobered. "If we do this, there's a good chance we won't survive. Even if we succeed, Kryn won't simply surrender. I know. And you're willing to risk your life for people you've never met? For a political situation you have no stake in? James looked past her to where Nea slept. I have a stake in that little girl growing up without being called cursed, in her mother not having to run forever, and honestly, he met Rissa's eyes, I have a stake in seeing where this goes, between us. Rissa's breath caught. She stepped close enough that he could see silver markings tracing down her neck. You're a complication I didn't anticipate, she said softly. I specialize in complications. Her hand rose to his face, fingertips tracing his jawline with surprising tenderness. If we survive this, I'm going to show you exactly how Cathari express gratitude to those who've earned it. Heat flooded through James at her tone, at the intent in her eyes. Incentive to survive, then. Substantial incentive. She leaned in, breath ghosting across his lips. But first, we steal a flagship. She pulled back, turning to Torvin. Gather the guards, we're changing plans, we go on the offensive. Torvin nodded despite his skepticism. And the child? She comes with us. She's the proof we need. Rissa turned back to James. Can you pilot a shuttle? I can pilot anything with engines and a control interface. Good. There's a small port 30 kilometers north. Military installation, lightly defended. We hit it fast, take their fastest ship, reach orbit before Kryn realizes we've changed tactics. Adrenaline surged through James. This was insane. Absolutely insane. When do we leave? Rissa smiled. As soon as you wake my daughter and tell her she's about to help her mother reclaim a throne. James crossed to where Nea slept. He knelt, gently touching her shoulder. She woke slowly, blinking. James, what's happening? Something important. Something that's going to change everything. We need you to be very brave. Nea sat up, rubbing her eyes. She looked down at her prosthetic, flexing the toes. Will there be more running? Probably a lot more running. She considered this, then nodded with serious acceptance. Okay, I can do that. James helped her stand, marveling at how naturally she moved. This was what Rissa's people needed to see, a child walking without shame, without limitation. Outside, the sun climbed higher, enemy forces converged, somewhere above a flagship waited. Rissa came to stand beside James, her hand finding his briefly. Thank you for giving me hope I'd forgotten how to feel. Thank me after we survive. No. Her eyes burned with intensity. Thank you now, because whatever happens next, you've already given me more than you know. You've given me my daughter back. You've given me a reason to believe impossible things are possible. She kissed him then, brief but electric, a promise sealed in the warmth of her lips. When she pulled back, she was smiling. Now let's go steal a ship and overthrow a government. James grinned. Best second date ever. The military installation fell in minutes. Rissa moved through guards like a force of nature, Torvin flanking with brutal efficiency. By the time James reached the hangar with Naya, 3 shuttles sat ready. That one, Rissa said, pointing to the sleekest vessel. Fastest in their fleet. James ran his hands over the controls. Familiar enough, he could work with this. They lifted off fast, punching through atmosphere, stars suddenly sharp against black. Ahead, Kryn's flagship dominated orbital space, a massive wedge bristling with weapons. How do we get aboard without being blown apart? James asked. Family access codes, my bloodline signature should still register. Should. Calculated risk. Rissa's hand rested on his shoulder, warmth bleeding through. Transmitting codes now. Seconds stretched, targeting sensors tracked them. James's hands hovered over evasive controls. Access granted, Torvin said. Docking Bay 7. Rissa's fingers trailed across the back of James's neck. Deliberate, promising. The docking bay swallowed them. James set down smooth, engines powering into silence. We won't have long, Rissa said. The communications hub is 12 decks up. We move fast. She looked at Nea. Stay close to James no matter what. The hatch opened. They moved. The flagship's corridors were vast, built for warrior physiology. They encountered minimal resistance at first, Rissa's bearing enough to make crew step aside. but 3 decks up, alarms wailed. "She knows," Rissa said. "Run." They sprinted through corridors suddenly filled with soldiers. Torvin's guards laid down, suppressing fire. James ran with Nea, her prosthetic pounding against deck plates, keeping pace perfectly. Rissa led them through maintenance corridors, avoiding main troop movements, but the net tightened, weapons fire increased, coordinated shouts echoed. They burst into a junction and found themselves surrounded. 24 soldiers, weapons trained. A figure stepped through them. She looked like Rissa, same height, same markings, but where Rissa's eyes held warmth, this woman's were cold calculation. Kryn. "Sister, you've saved me the trouble of hunting you. How thoughtful." Rissa positioned herself in front of Nea. "Hello, Kryn, still wearing our mother's crown?" "The crown you abandoned when you birthed that abomination." Kryn's gaze fell on Nea, then the prosthetic. Her eyes widened. "What is this?" "Progress." Kryn stepped closer, studying the prosthetic with alarm. "You let that creature walk? You mock the gods with this mechanical blasphemy?" "I let my daughter walk because a human engineer proved it was never divine judgment, just genetics, random chance that could happen to any Cathari." Kryn's face contorted. "I can prove it," James said, stepping forward. "Your niece isn't an abomination. She just needed help your species couldn't provide. I provided it, and I can do it again." Kryn's attention fixed on him like a targeting laser. "The human, you've caused me considerable trouble." She moved fast, gripping his throat, lifting him. Her strength was staggering. "I should kill you slowly." "Do it," James choked. "But the knowledge doesn't die with me. The prosthetic exists. People have seen it. Your lie has an expiration date." Rissa moved, but soldiers blocked her. Nea cried out. A voice cut through. "My queen, the human shuttle, it's broadcasting." Kryn's head snapped around. "What?" Automated transmission, wideband, video footage of the child walking, medical data, engineering specifications. It's already reached the surface. Kryn released James. He collapsed, gasping. "When?" she demanded. "The moment we landed," James rasped. "Hidden in docking protocols. I'm an engineer. I plan ahead." Rissa stared at him with pride and desire mixed in her eyes. Kryn turned to soldiers. "Shut down all communications." "Too late," Torvin said. 4 minutes of transmission. Every major population center has it." Kryn drew her blade, advancing on James. "Then you die for nothing." "You'll declare it divine miracle," Rissa said. Everyone turned. "You'll claim the gods sent a human to prove their mercy, that they've lifted judgment. You'll take credit for finding this engineer." Rissa's voice carried command. "Or you'll watch your power crumble when people realize you've been lying, that you let children suffer when solutions existed." Calculation played across Kryn's face. "And what do you gain, sister?" "I don't want your throne. I want my daughter to live free, to walk without shame. Give me that, and I'll give you a way to survive this." Kryn's blade lowered slightly. "You'd accept exile permanently?" "I'd accept peace, for both of us." James pushed himself upright, moving to Rissa's side. His hand found hers. "Your sister's offering a gift, a way to be remembered as the queen who brought healing instead of perpetuating suffering. Take it." Kryn looked between them. Then slowly she sheathed her blade. "I'll consider your proposal, but if this technology fails, I will hunt you across the galaxy." "It won't fail," James said. "Then take my guarantee," Rissa added. "As your sister. This works, let it work." Kryn stared at them, then turned to her soldiers. "Escort them to guest quarters, under guard until I decide their fate." Not freedom, but not execution. James would take it. As soldiers surrounded them, Rissa leaned close. "You brilliant, reckless, perfect man, you just saved us all." "We saved us all." Her lips brushed his ear. "Later, when we're alone, I'm going to show you proper gratitude. Cathari gratitude, which involves considerably less talking and considerably more touching." Heat flooded through James despite everything. Incentive to survive guard quarters. Substantial incentive. They were led through corridors, but James felt lighter. The broadcast was out, the lie exposed, and Rissa's hand was warm in his, promising futures he'd never imagined. Across the Cathari homeworld, people were watching a little girl walk, and their understanding was changing. Sometimes revolutions started with weapons. Sometimes they started with an engineer and a child taking her first steps. The guest quarters were luxurious prisons, plush furnishings, locked doors, guards outside. James stood at the viewport watching the planet rotate below, cities glittering against dark continents. Thinking about escape plans, Rissa asked. She'd settled Nea into sleep an hour ago. Now she approached, moving with predatory grace. Thinking about what happens next. Kryn is calculating, measuring public response. Rissa stopped beside him, shoulders touching. My sister will claim credit if the broadcast generates sympathy, blame us if it generates controversy. Through the viewport, shuttles moved between flagship and surface, more traffic than before. Something's happening. Delegation ships, she's addressing the council. Rissa pressed closer. It means she's making a decision. James turned to face her. This close, he could see silver markings traced intricate patterns across her skin. What happens if we survive this? If Kryn accepts the deal? Rissa's eyes searched his face. I take Nea somewhere quiet, somewhere she can grow up without threats. Her hand rose to his chest. Unless someone decided that quiet sounded appealing, that watching a child grow up was worth more than whatever life they'd left behind. James covered her hand with his. I spent years in labs solving problems for people I'd never meet. Then I found something better, something that actually matters. Careful, engineer, you're starting to sound like someone who cares. I care about a little girl with a prosthetic leg, about her mother who gave up everything, about futures that didn't seem possible a week ago. Rissa's hand rose to his face, fingertips tracing his jawline. When this is over, when we're somewhere safe, I'm going to take my time with you. No interruptions, just you and me and all the gratitude I've been storing up. Heat flooded through James. That's a lot of incentive. I'm very motivated. She leaned in, kissing him, gentle at first, then consuming. Her hand slid into his hair. James pulled her closer, feeling the difference in their bodies. She made a sound low in her throat that bypassed his brain entirely. When they broke apart, breathing hard, Rissa's eyes had gone dark. I want you, she said simply. I wanted you when you saved my daughter, when you made that grenade, when you broadcast truth across my world, and I definitely want you now. She kissed him again, deeper, pressing him back against the viewport. James's hands found her waist, slid up her sides. Rissa's fingers worked at his shirt until she could touch bare skin. You're warm, she murmured. You're not exactly cold yourself. She walked him backward toward the sleeping quarters, never breaking contact. They crossed the threshold and... The door chimed, sharp and insistent. Rissa pulled back with a frustrated growl. Terrible timing. She straightened her clothing, composure sliding back. James tried to do the same, hands unsteady. Torvin stood at the door, carefully not looking at them. My queen, the council has reached verdict. Kryn requires your presence in the throne room. Rissa's expression went neutral. We go together, all of us, including Nea. They woke Nea gently. The girl stood steady on her prosthetic, taking James's hand. Guards led them through corridors that felt less hostile now, more uncertain. The throne room was vast. Council members lined both sides. At the far end, Kryn sat on a throne carved from dark stone. They walked the length of the room, footsteps echoing. Nea's hand tightened in James's. Kryn studied them, face unreadable. The broadcast reached 4 billion Cathari, medical facilities flooded with inquiries, parents asking if healing is possible, priests demanding heresy charges, warriors calling for execution, and citizens saying they've watched a miracle. She descended the steps, standing level with them. You've created chaos, sister. I've created possibility, Rissa replied. What you do with it determines whether it becomes chaos or progress. Kryn turned to James. Can you replicate this? Create prosthetics for others? Yes, given proper facilities. And you would do this? For a species not your own? I'd do it for children who need help. Species is irrelevant. Something shifted in Kryn's expression, calculation giving way to grudging respect. The council has decided you will establish a medical facility, train Ketheri engineers, heal those we once called cursed. She looked at Rissa. And you will oversee this program, not as queen but as minister. You'll have resources, authority, and my protection. Rissa's eyes widened. You're offering me a position in your government? I'm offering you purpose that doesn't threaten my throne. Take it or leave it. Rissa looked at James, silent question. He squeezed Nea's hand, thinking about workshops and children who needed help, about building something with a woman who'd given up everything for her daughter. We accept, Rissa said, on one condition. James works as my partner, not subordinate, equal authority. Kryn looked between them, reading unspoken connection. Partnership, how democratic, agreed, but if this fails, I hold you both accountable. It won't fail, James said. See that it doesn't. As they turned to leave, Kryn spoke again. Sister, thank you, for finding a way that didn't require one of us to die. Rissa paused. Thank you for being wise enough to take it. Outside, the planet turned, cities glittering with 4 billion lives that had just shifted their understanding. We did it, James said. We changed history, started a revolution with a prosthetic leg and stubborn human ingenuity. Rissa pulled him into an alcove away from guards. Nea wandered to a viewport. When we get to the surface, Rissa said, hands framing James's face, when we have privacy and time, I'm going to show you exactly how grateful I am, thoroughly, repeatedly. James's breath caught. I'm getting a clearer picture. She kissed him, deep and claiming. I love you, James Foster. I don't know when it happened. Maybe when you handed Nea her leg, maybe when you broadcast truth across my world, but somewhere between engineering and revolution, I fell completely in love with you. James felt something tight in his chest release, expand, fill with warmth. I love you too, you terrifying, brilliant, perfect woman. Nea's voice called from the viewport. James, Mom, come look, you can see where we're going. They joined her, 3 figures pressed against glass, looking at their future. A continent with cities and facilities and children who needed help. A life built on healing and partnership and love that had grown between danger. James slipped his arm around Rissa's waist. She leaned into him, solid and warm and real. Below, the world turned. Above, stars waited, and between them, possibilities stretched, infinite and bright. Sometimes revolutions started with weapons and armies. Sometimes they started with an engineer, a child, and a mother who'd given up everything. And sometimes they ended with love.